Hey guys, it's Liz again. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, Segment 4, and first we're going to be discussing the psychological measures that should be both reliable and valid. Reliability is the degree to which your measurement tool produces consistent, repeatable results, and validity is the degree to which your measurement tool actually measures what it's supposed to be measuring. It is good to remember that a good measurement tool is both reliable and valid. In most psychological processes, it's hard to directly observe. So in these cases, we try to devise a psychological test, which is a way of measuring a psychological event or process. In psychological tests, we want it to both be reliable and valid. Reliability is an easier concept to understand because it simply just has to be consistent and repeatable. If a test is not reliable, it simply cannot be valid. For a psychological test to be valid, it has to be measuring what we think it is measuring, and that means that it is valid. And for it to be a good test, it has to be both reliable and valid. Next, we're going to talk about how psychologists strive to avoid bias by withholding information. It is known that sometimes in an experiment, experimenters can have unconscious bias to the patients that they're observing. Unconscious bias is an inclination to prefer one type of person, object, or idea over others without being consciously aware of that preference. It is not okay for experimenters to be unconsciously biased because then the results are not reliable and valid. It is thought to be that most human judgments are all biased. A famous paradox is the Pepsi paradox, which is where most Americans say that they prefer Coke over Pepsi, but when blindly tested, a lot of people preferred Pepsi over Coke, and apparently most people are actually enjoy the soda more if they think it is Coca-Cola based on advertising. To control unconscious bias, we also go into something called a placebo, or a pill or other treatment that has no physiological effect and are told to expect particular effects. They are likely to report having exactly those effects. The most common placebo is a sugar pill, and placebos are used in experiments to control the experiment compared to another form of drug. Placebo-controlled trials are known to be maximally effective and are very important in treatment. The best form of assessment for evaluating drug effectiveness, in which patients are randomly assigned to either the drug or placebo treatment, and neither the patient nor the person evaluating his progress knows which group he is in, is called randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials. This is when both the patient and the experimenter taking the results don't know which the placebo is and what pill is actually meant to be the actual drug being tested. This makes the test more valid and reliable. In human and animal experimentation, there are standards of ethical conduct. There was a controversial study in the U.S. called the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, which is when the U.S. Public Health Service and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention followed the progression of syphilis in hundreds of poor African American men in Alabama without providing them with a known cure for the disease. In 1947, it was widely known that a standard penicillin would cure syphilis, yet the scientists still continued the study for another 25 years, never telling the infected men that they had the disease, and took no steps to get them effective treatment. Because of this, the disease carried on to those spouses and to the children of the ones being experimented on. This was a very controversial issue, and in a few years, Congress passed the National Research Act, which created guidelines for the ethical conduct of research. This started the IRB, or also the Institutional Review Board, which is a group of individuals convened by an institution to ensure studies involving humans meet ethical standards. The IRB also requires informed consent, which is the process of informing participants in a study about what they'll be doing and any risk they'll face, then getting their active agreement beforehand. When it comes to animals, a group of individuals convened by an institution to review and approve the proposed research with animals has to approve it before the research begins, and this is called the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or the IACUC. The IACUC is mostly involved when it comes to animals, and it's important to know that the IRB or the IACUC is typically a multi-step process, and it's very rare that a proposal is approved the very first time that an investigator submits it. These boards are made to make sure that all studies are ethically allowed, and another issue concerning ethical scientific behavior is whether or not researchers should be required to report all the results, even if those results do not support their favorite hypothesis. And this ends our discussion for today's talk.